ॐ श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम् अज्ञानाञ्जाह्नवीतीर्थं विद्यातीर्थं विवेकिनां सर्वेषां सुखदं तीर्थं भारतीतीर्थमाश्रये विद्याविनयसम्पन्नं वीतरागं विवेकिनं वन्दे वेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञं विधुशेखरभारतीम्. Dear friends, welcome to another session of PRABODHA SUDHAKARA. Today, our discussion is going to start with the chapter number 5, which is Mano Nigraha Prakaranam. That is, restraint of the mind is going to be the topic of discussion within this chapter. The ideas in this chapter were preceded by the Vishaya Nigraha Prakaranam in the previous chapter, in which Bhagavad Padal had guided us the pitfalls of attaching oneself with the sensory objects. In the previous chapter, the dangers of associating the sense of pleasure with the sense of pleasure which arises from the contact of the sense organs and the sensory object was elaborately by Bhagavad Padal, and it ended with a warning that even as the lifetime is going away, the person keeps indulging in various sensory pleasures, and this results in not only the waste of a human body, the waste of an entire lifetime which is meant for gaining the self-knowledge, but it also positively affects the spiritual path, the spiritual development of the jiva. Now, in this chapter, the further deeper root causes of why one goes towards the objects is being examined, and the mind is said to be the entity. The mind is said to be the cause for the desire to associate with the sense organs. Now, whereas the mind, which is not having the capability or not having developed the faculty of vichara, not having developed the faculty of viveka, vairagya, etc., such a unenlightened mind is the cause for the problem. The enlightened mind, that is the mind which has the ability, or the mind which has developed the faculty of doing vichara, of having viveka and vairagya, having the process, ability to do the process of inquiry, having developed the ability to do the process of inquiry into the nature of objects, into the nature of happiness, what is right and what is wrong, what is good for me and what is not good for me, etc. Such an enlightened mind is also the one's tool to remove oneself from the problem of attachment towards the sense objects. Right. So the manas, the mind, is one's friend also, and it is also one's enemy. The unenlightened mind, the avichara, the mind which doesn't have the capability of vichara, which has not developed the capability of vichara, that is the enemy. Whereas the mind which has developed the capability of vichara, that is one's friend. So in this Mano Nigraha Prakaranam, Bhagavad Padal, one may say, is giving us the technique or the teaching by which one can convert the mind from being one's enemy to being one's friend. So here, the teaching overall of this particular chapter is that one should have the ability, retain the ability, practice the ability to withdraw oneself from the sense objects and the sense organs. So that is Mano Nigraha. And this ability, the precursor to this ability is, wherever the mind goes, do not follow it. That ability should be retained by the individual. So one must remember, the mind takes us in, or has the capability to carry us forward in various ways, according to its own prior impressions, which we call as the various vasanas. So as and when there is an embodiment, that is, we attain a certain body, immediately the mind, which has got all the vasanas from the previous janmas, has the capability to pull us towards things which are good also. At the same time, it has the ability to pull us towards things which are pleasurable but are very much bad for us. So the individual, that is I myself, have to retain, have to have the buddhi shakti, have to maintain the vichara shakti to think about where the mind is taking us, analyze where the mind wants us to go, and decide whether this particular path which the mind wants us to take is the correct path or is a problematic path. So keeping that in mind, we have to walk through the various experiences in life, the entire lifetime. We have to keep this sense of buddhi shakti or the vichara shakti within us. So in order to do that, one has to first recognize that I am not mind, first of all. The mind is a tool which is given to me, just as much as the body is a tool which is given to me. In the same way, the mind is also a tool which is given to me. I am not the mind. The mind is simply a tool which I can develop, which I can direct to achieve what I really want to achieve. What Shastra says is my ultimate goal. To achieve that, I use the body and I use the mind. This is the attitude of a sadhaka. Where the mind wants to go, where the body finds pleasurable to be in that state only, if I keep my body and mind, then that will not be a appropriate method for developing ourselves along the path of spiritual progress. Whereas we have to direct the mind should not be directing us. The mind should not be the master of the person has to be the master of the mind. So with this idea in mind, we proceed to understand the verses in this chapter. Let us read the verse number 65. Sviyodgamatoyavaha sagarumupayati nichamargena sa chet udgama eva sthira sati kinnayati vardhitvam. So there are many important verses, many verses of deep import in this chapter. I request your attention very closely. Now, this first two verses are themselves very deep verses. They are actually talking about certain topics which we have not yet seen within this Prakarana Grantha. So you need some understanding of what is the way of Vedanta as you progress down the Vedantic path to actually understand this verse very deeply. But at this stage, whatever we understand from this, within the topic of this chapter, that is what we will see currently. Sviya udgamatoyavaha sagaramupayati nicha margena sache udgama eva sthira sati kinnayati vardhitvam. Okay, so one example is being presented here by Bhagavad Padal. What is this example? We will see. And what is this example for? That is this is an analogy which is given for something that will be seen in the next verse. So first now let us discuss this example. So you imagine the river which flows down from the top of a mountain. So the river typically, all rivers originate at the top of some mountain in the form of various streams, and these streams slowly collect together down as the mountain goes, and these streams become bigger and bigger, and they become like rivers, and they finally enter the sea or the ocean, which is very big in size. In order for the river, or in order for the stream to become the river and the river to become the ocean, it has to follow the pathway down, starting from the top down the mountain. So that is being talked about in the first half of the verse. Sviya udgamatoyavaha sagaram upayati nicha margena. So the stream starting from the top goes via this path down. From the top it travels downwards. So nicha margena sagaram upayati. Sviya udgamatoyavaha means what? So the stream which originates the top of the thing, at the top of the mountain, or in a very elevated place, that stream of water slowly sagaram upayati. It enters the sea, or it eventually becomes the sea via this path from top to bottom. Now, suppose, imagine a scenario where this water which originates in the top of this elevated place or mountain like place does not travel down, but just starts collecting. The stream, anyway, the water is coming out, but the water is not going to flow, suppose, but it remains in that elevated place by some, method. It is kept in that elevated place only. At the same time, it is still gushing out. The stream is still coming, but it is maintaining its height. The height is not reducing. It is not traveling downwards. Suppose Sachet Udgamayeva Sthira Sati. So suppose it remains wherever it starts to originate, there only it remains, that stream. Kinnayati Vardhitvam. Will it not become a huge body of water where it starts to originate? This is the example which is being given. That stream of water which normally flows down to become the ocean, if it remains where it is, will it not gain Vardhitvam? Vardhitvam means what? Will it not increase its volume? Will it not become a large water body? So you should imagine some kind of a large water body in the top of the mountain. It is a lake which is present in the top of a mountain. Imagine it like that. Is it not possible, instead of losing the energy and traveling down and down and down and becoming mixed with in fact, the waters of the ocean or the waters of the sea, they are salty and they are not directly useful for drinking, whereas the water which is there at the top of the mountain can be, it is quite pure, and it can be actually it is potable water. It can be useful for drinking purposes. So it is not salty, it is fresh water. So why does it not remain? So the question, or the question which is being raised here is that, okay, if it remains on the top of the elevated place or the mountain, will it not become a large water body? In order to gain the largeness, in order to gain the volume, does it have to travel down, is the question. And in the process of traveling down, it collects many impurities, it collects various salts. Eventually it becomes part of the salty ocean, which is not useful for any drinking purposes. So that is the analogy which is kept in mind, the example which is given. For what is the example given? We will read the next verse. Evam manasvahetum vicharayat susthiram bhavedantaha na bahirvodeti tada kim natmatvam swayam yati. So this is the deep verse I was talking about. So here Bhagavad is connecting the manas to the river which we saw in the previous verse. That stream of water which originates, that river which originates in the top of the mountain, is analogous to the mind. In the way that was suggested in the previous verse, just as that stream of water, if it remains where it is without traveling downwards, it attains the huge volume, it becomes a large water body of pure water there itself, wherever it originates. In the same way, if the mind does not relent to the various desires, if it does not relent to the desires, if it does not travel in search of these sense objects, sensory pleasures, then it can remain where it originates, and there itself it can attain ananda or purnatvam or happiness. Wherever it originates, if it does not move around from that place, if it remains in that place, there itself it will attain ananda, purnatvam and happiness. That ananda or that happiness, that sukha which is experienced due to the sensory objects is like the mind, just as the river is traveling downwards, collecting various impurities and mixing with the sea. In the same way, the mind has to enter the sense organs, it has to pass through the sense organs, and then in the process it has to gain the worldly objects. Because of this, lot of impurities are gained by the mind. When the mind becomes an enjoyer of worldly objects, it goes in search of worldly objects, it is desiring for worldly objects. It is as though it is like a river which is for catching lot of impurities and joining with the salty sea. So that salty sea also, even though it is a large volume of water, it is not potable water, it is not drinkable water. In the same way, this happiness or Vishayananda, which is gained via the Vishayas, which is gained via the sensory objects, that is not real Ananda, that is not Purnananda, that is not Nityananda. It is only temporary pleasure. It is a temporary happiness, temporary feeling of fulfillment. It also creates lots of problems, lots of various impressions. That vasana is also created slowly for the mind to suffer in the future also because of this sensory happiness. So instead of doing all this, why not the mind remain in its place of origin and attain ananda there itself? That is the message. Evam manaha swahetum vicharayat susthiram bhavedantaha na bahirvodeti tada kinnatmatvam swayam yati. So if the mind remains where it is, how does it remain where it is? Swahetum vicharayat susthiram. By taking the process of vichara, by trying to understand where did I come from, what is my nature, what is the nature of the self, what is the nature of Brahman. In this way, if it inquires into the real nature of the mind, real nature of the world, real nature of the self, it will remain, it will get the ability to remain where it originated, from what it originated. Swahetum vicharayati. So why did I come? For what reason I came? Because of what I came? If it inquires into this nature, that is, if Vedanta vichara. So the inquiry into the nature cannot be done by closing the eyes, by it cannot self-inquiry, Atma Vichara one may say, but Atma Vichara is done through the inquiry of the Vedanta Shastra. By inquiry into the Vedanta Shastra, it gains the ability to understand its real nature and remain there. Suppose it does that, evam manaha swahetum vicharayat susthiram bhavet. Suppose it remains there, susthiram means what? Without shaking, without any disturbance, without disturbing itself with thoughts about worldly affairs, with thoughts about worldly objects, sense objects. Suppose it remains bhavet, antaha bhavet. So suppose it remains inside. Inside means what? With its own nature, without removing itself from its own nature. Suppose it remains na bahirvodeti tada. If it does not travel outside, if it does not flow downwards into the uh, dirty waters, into the dirty plains, dirty waters of sensory objects, of the sense organs, then will it not gain the atmatvam? Will it not gain the uh, beatitude? Will it not gain the nature of the self? That is, will it not become Purnananda? Will it not become permanently fulfilled? Nityananda, permanently fulfilled forever by its own nature? Will it not happen? That is the example, or that is the connection to the Shastra that is being talked about. So the previous example talked about the river which remains on the top of the mountain. That is connected to the mind, which, by inquiry into the nature of the self and of the mind and of the world, by inquiry into its own nature, it understands the truth and it abides in the truth. If it does that, then that itself will result in Atmananda, Vishaya, the Purnananda, Mokshananda, Nityananda. And therefore, that is what is called as Atmatvam Swayam Yati. So it becomes of the nature of the Atman. Just like the Atman is ever pure, it is ever happy, it is ever fulfilled. In the same way, the mind will also become ever pure, ever happy, ever fulfilled. It will become. So that is the message. So remember the Prakaranam is going to talk about Mano Nigraha, and the Mano Nigraha has been beautifully defined by Bhagavad Padal. What is Mano Nigraha? The process and the fruit of Mano Nigraha, the phala of Mano Nigraha is described beautifully by Bhagavad Padal in this verse itself. Continuing. So one more example of the same type is given here. And here in in this example, which is following up in the next verse also. So this verse gives the metaphor or the simile, and next verse is going to connect it with sadhana or our spiritual practice. Here the glory of Vairagya the utility of Vairagya is being talked about in via these two verses. Varsha swambha prachayat kupe gurur nirjare payah ksharam grishmenaiva tu shushke madhuryam bhajati tatrambha. Varshasu ambah prachayat. So during the rainy season, when there is rains, by the flow of water from the sky, ambah prachayat, by the flow of water, because of the rains, kupe gurur nidhare kupe paya ksharam. So waters are collected in deep wells, gurur nirjare, in deep wells which have lot of streams. Kupe means wells, gurur nirjare means they have lot of these incoming streams. Water gets collected because of the heavy rains. Payaha means water. Ksharam means this water which gets collected remains very salty. This initially, after the rains, whatever waters are collected via the various streams flowing from the earth into the well, that water remains very salty. But when this same water, after the rains have gone away, Grishmenaiva tu shushke madhuryam bhajati tatra ambaha. In the same water, tatra ambaha, in the same water, Grishmenaiva. Because of the exposure of this water to the sun, it slowly starts drying up and it slowly attains the quality of becoming, the previous saltiness goes away and madhuryam bhajati, it becomes sweet water. So those who have the good fortune of having wells near their house, who have the access to wells, actual wells which are not the bore well which we know, but the actual wells, the old type wells which are very important for dharmic practices. If you have access to them, you can verify this statement. As and when the waters that are collected in the well because of the rains, they get exposed to the sun for a certain period of time, and after this exposure, the saltiness goes away and a sense of slight sense of taste of sweetness comes into the water. Madhuryam bhajati. Because of the heat which is experienced due to the sun. So Grishmenaiva the shushke. Shushke means as it gets dried up because of the heat. Grishmenaiva, it attains a madhurya, it attains a sense of sweetness. In the same way, now coming to our topic, in the same way, tatvat vishayodriktam tamah pradhanam manah kalusham tasmin viraga shushke shanakair avirbhavet sattvam. Tadvad. So Tadvad means what? As is mentioned in the, as is given by the example in the previous verse. Vishayodriktam tamah pradhanam manaha kalusham. So that mind which is connected with sense objects all the time, which is of the nature of searching for. So it is only in two modes. The mind, suppose it is only in two modes. Either it is searching for objects or it is in enjoyment mode. I am trying to get happiness from sense objects, or I am always enjoying with sense objects. I have attained it and I am enjoying for a period of time. Only in these two modes, if the mind is ever present, then such a mind is said to be tamah pradhanam, kalusham. It is filled with impurities. It is filled with darkness. Tamah pradhanam. So such a mind, how to remove the darkness and how to remove the impurities? Tasmin viraga shushke shanakair avirbhavet sattvam. Viraga shushke, just as it was mentioned in the previous verse, in the heat of the sun, the water dries up, the salty water gets transformed into the sweet water. In the same way, here also one heat is required. What is that heat? Viraga. Vairagyam, the dispassion, that is saying no to enjoyments. Simple, you can say one phrase definition of Vairagya, saying no to pleasures derived from sense objects. That is Viragaha. Saying no to the desires of the mind. The mind may desire, I don't give in to that desire. That is viraga. So in that, so when you deny the thing to the mind, just as when you deny a certain desired objects to a child, the child may react. The child may start crying, it may do antics, this, that, and all. In the same way, you have to look at the mind. The mind is like a child now. It is interested in some eating chocolates all the time. You have to, it is your duty to restrain it so that it becomes a healthy mind. Just as one may restrain the child from eating more and more chocolates, in the same way, in order to get a healthy mind, one must restrain from indulging in attachment or association with sense objects all the time, giving into desires all the time. So viraga shushke, in the heat of this vairagya produces some suffering to the mind. That suffering is temporary, that heat is temporary, but that in that heat, tasmin viraga shushke shanakaihi avirbhavet sattvam. Slowly and slowly, shanakaihi avirbhavet, sattvam avirbhavet. The mind attains the quality of peace. Sattvam is a sattva guna. Sattva guna is characterized by peace and tranquility. That is, ability to remain happy with association with sense objects. That is the quality of sattva. That is what we call as peace and tranquility. Without anything, I remain fulfilled. I remain without sorrow or suffering or hankering or disturbance in my mind. When somebody asks me, when I look at myself, I see a pleased person. I see a person who is pleased with oneself, one's own mind. I don't want anything, sir. I am quite peaceful. I am quite peaceful. That mind, such a mind which reports itself as being peaceful, slowly that quality is gained by this mind which is exposed to the vairagyam. So one has to train the mind to attain this quality. Initially, it is no doubt difficult, but as you progress, you attain this great ability of remaining happy without association with sense objects. Why you should remain happy without association with sense objects? We have seen before, association with sense objects does create pleasure, but that pleasure comes with lot of suffering. Either after the sense objects go away, or even as the sense object is there, then also there is a suffering. Or if you don't get it, then also there is a suffering. That Acharya Bhagavad Pada is going to talk about now. If you don't get sense objects, also suffering. If you get it, then some temporary few seconds or minutes of pleasure. Then after they go away, more suffering. Even as you experience it also, sometimes there is suffering. So this message one has to remember. Very deep verses in this chapter, verses which are meant for our sadhana practice are mentioned in this chapter. We have to remember them. Continuing. Yam vishayamapi lashitva dhavati bahyendriyadvara tasya apraptau khidyati tatha yatha swangatam kinchit. Yam vishayamapi lashitva dhavati bahyendriyadvara. So how does the mind operate to gain its objects of desires? It needs to access the body and the sense organs. It has to move through the sense organs. So the mind directs the sense organs. Via the sense organs, it tries to reach the sensory objects. So one may remember there is a Ratha Kalpana. That is, there is a metaphor of the chariot and the horses and the charioteer and the person who is traveling in the chariot, etc., which was mentioned in Kathopanishad. So in that Kathopanishad, the chariot is the body. That is, there is a chariot. The chariot is the human body, and the chariot is driven by some 5 horses. Those are the sense organs. The horses are managed by the mind, which is the chariot. The charioteer is traveling with is directing the chariot to go to places, but the jiva is the self is the person. The jiva is the person who is traveling in the chariot. So the jiva, the person who is traveling in the chariot, has to tell the charioteer, you go there, you go here, because this is where I want to go. The chariot, the person who is traveling in the chariot has to tell the destination, not the charioteer, not the horses. If the horses are simply left to their will, they will go wherever they want to go. If the charioteer is left to his will, the charioteer will also go wherever he wants to go. So the person who is traveling has to direct. So in that way, the mind has to be directed, and through the mind, the sense organs have to be directed. Here, the opposite is happening. Suppose that the person traveling in the chariot is sleeping, then that charioteer will take the chariot to wherever he wants. So the mind will take the freedom to go wherever it wants. So it directs the sense organs to go. This is what I desire, you acquire that. So yam vishayam lashitva. Lashitva means desires. So as and when it desires, immediately it starts to run. So dhavati bahyendriyadvara dhavati. So it launches itself through the sense organs to gain whatever it desires for. So every time when you hear the word this dhavati and all these bahyendriyadvara, etc., these are all energies which are meant to for spiritual purposes, which are meant to for upliftment of the jiva. They are being utilized in a wasteful manner for acquiring the sense objects. That is the understanding which you must have. Tasya apraptau khidyati. When the sense objects are not gained, suppose they are gained, what happens? In the previous chapter itself we saw temporary pleasure but long-term pain as the object goes away. That will be caused. Suppose it does not gain, tasya apraptau khidyati tatha yatha swangatam kinchit. If that object is initially that object is not with me, I have hankering for that object. The mind has hankering for that object, so it goes towards. But when I don't get it, it is not as though the mind is not thinking. The verse says something, but before that, you understand, the mind is not thinking, I did not have it before, now I don't have it, my state has not changed, so why should I be sorrowful? That is not the way it thinks. Previously also I did not have it, now also I don't have it, so no change in my scenario. Why should I be sorrowful? If you think like that, then there is no problem. But that is not the way the mind thinks. Tasya apraptau khidyati. When the object is not obtained, khidyati means what? It suffers. It goes into sorrow mode. Yatha swangatam kinchit. It suffers. In what way? As though whatever it has got before, now it lost. Oh, you see the irony, the strange scenario here. I did not have that object before, so I went in search for it. Now I did not get it. Now I think that object which I searched for is not obtained by me. I deserved to get it, but I did not get it. Therefore, I am suffering. As though it was already with me and I am now it has gone away. The object already I got it. Now it has gone away. In that manner, I suffer. Somebody stole something from me. As though it happened. In that way, the mind suffers. So the cause of suffering is the mind itself here. It is that mind which is confused. The confused mind, the unenlightened mind is the cause for suffering. And the stupidity, the stupid mind is the cause for suffering. Well, stupid seems to be harsh. So let us say it is our own friend. It is our mind. So therefore we may say the unenlightened mind. So the duty that the sadhaka has is to teach the mind, is to guide the mind. And guiding the mind is possible only if the association is there with Shastra. Shastra is the light with which the mind can become enlightened. Continuing. Nagara Durga Durgama Saritah Paribhrame Chetaha Yedi no Labhate Vishayantritam Iva Kin Ayati. So it's another similar verse. Naga, mountain, Nagara in various towns. Durga Durgama Saritaha in various, so Saritaha means various lakes and water bodies. Durga Durgama, so in the forts, in the various buildings, etc., it roams around. Paritaha Paribhrame Chetaha. So one may think about it as, you travel, you are a traveler. I am a traveler. So the traveler say, those people who like to travel, I am a traveler. Why you are traveling? I like to see places. Why you like to see places? Because there is a joy which you get by going and seeing places. So for that purpose, I am traveling. In the same way, the mind is roaming about here and there, Naga. So like the traveler, on one place he goes, the traveler, he may say, I am going to a mountain hike, then I am going to see the city, and I am going to see various beautiful buildings and architectural details in the city. I am going to see places of beauty, etc. Like that, always the traveler is moving out to see various places in which the traveler may or may not experience some joy. So in the same way, the mind is trying to travel, the mind is trying to roam about in various places, trying to see if it can derive some joy. So paritha paribhrame chetaha, chetaha paribhramat. So not paribhrame, paribhramat. Chetaha paribhramat. In all these places it roams about. Yedi no labhate vishayam. Suppose the desired happiness, desired objects are not obtained, vishayantritam khinnam ayati. It attains sorrow as though it is being pulled, it is being handled, manhandled by this vishayas. See, there is no actual connection between the vishaya and the mind, but the mind, by its own desire, repeated engagement in the desire, it has established some imaginary connection. It has made real some imaginary connection. And because of that imaginary connection, which is very strong in the mind, it endures suffering. Because of confusion, because of ignorance, it suffers. That is the message. Now what is the removal of that suffering? Slowly towards that Bhagavad Padal is moving towards. We will continue reading these verses in the next meeting.